One thing that gets talked about a ton, I know I take a beating on it, is the horses having their head low. And what people don't get, we're breeding these horses to carry themselves this way. It doesn't make sense that his head's not down. The only thing I could think is he didn't want to have it down. You can see like Stopper here, he's comfortable walking around like this because if we take the saddle off, which we will later, you'll see that when he's in a relaxed state, Mother Nature just made him like this with his neck low. So with that being said, I thought, well, how about if I try to hold his head up? If I make him, right now I'm trying to make him put his head down and he wants to put it up. So I'm going to try to make him put his head up and see if he wants to put it down. And I'll be darned, in about one day, this horse dropped his head about 3 feet. And as long as he's comfortable about it and relaxed, he's going to stay in that position. Now, granted, yeah, for sure, I've taught him how to be soft in the face and soft in his body. I'm not actively walking around here trying to make him have his head down. I spent probably 30 days the other way trying to get, having my hands a little lower, trying to make him put his head down. What I'm getting at is they're bred to be like that. Pick that head up. Say, no, I want you to have your head up. And look at him going, no, I want to have it down. He literally went from having his head where it's at right now to having his head in the ground like you guys saw. And you saw I wasn't trying to force him to do it. Don't worry about trying to get them super soft and chin on their chest. This is just a little trick that we want to get their necks dropped down. And that's why I don't get that worked up when I hear people talking about it, because they just don't know.
I'm not trying to pick on Matt here. In fact, I admire that he's genuinely trying to help people on this platform and elsewhere. That's not something you see many other trainers doing. He comes across as a personable, likable guy, and he's willing to take a stance on something he believes in. And coincidentally, I also understand how grating a comment section can be, so with that, I can truly empathize. That being said, Matt's situation and stance is not unique. The way he talks about headsets while actively training one are exactly the kind of coping mechanism we see across the American stock horse world. Whether it's true misunderstanding or just a byproduct of the industry's culture, I can't say, but the effect is the same, a disconnect between what is rewarded and what is biomechanically correct. I'm trying very hard to keep this simple to understand, but in this video, we are going to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to explore what collection actually is, the 3 components that make it up, and the biomechanics behind each of those. We'll also look at what counts as a low headset by the world standards versus an extremely low headset and whether either can function biomechanically in terms of true collection. Finally, we'll talk about conformation and the challenges it may pose in the stock breeds. Now, before anyone gets up in arms, here's a confession. I was a filthy pleasure horse rider. On a halter horse, no less. Because he was a halter horse, there was no way to ride him traditionally. It took actual years to get him to where he could successfully perform Western pleasure, and that was due to collection. He beat horses that should have been wiping the floor with him, at least as far as pedigrees would go, as well as claiming victory over very, very well-renowned pleasure trainers. He was fabulous in hunt seat in the years leading up to mastering the lope, and frankly, I'm pretty sure the fundamentals I learned under dressage trainers earlier in my riding days wholly contributed to our success. Basically, I've been in the pen. I've had the world quality horse, and I'd gladly show the pleasure again. Getting this horse to do it gave me such a huge appreciation for the discipline, so hopefully this isn't misconstrued as some call for a 180-degree reform, but there are some big issues we have to tackle in this video in the pleasure pens and the reining. For the sake of terminology going forward, we will be referring to a level headset where the pole is level with the withers or slightly above as a level headset. To allow for some forgiveness of conformational challenges, we'll also abide by the AQHA's rules that a pole can be 2 inches below the wither. Anything lower than this, I will be referring to it as a low headset. An overbent neck will be addressed as an overbent neck. Behind the vertical will mean that when the plane of the nose goes behind a perfectly vertical line. Hopefully that gets us all on the same page and catches people who may not be familiar with the American stock breeds or the Western disciplines up to speed. And it better allows me to communicate with you all plainly. In 2015, Bob Avila, a man with more accolades than I can list here, wrote an article for Horse and Rider titled "How Low Can They Go?" In it, he addresses the growing trend of the artificially low headset in reining horses. The article begins like this. You may have seen this at a top reining event or on a YouTube reining highlight video. As a rider guides his horse through a pattern, the horse packs his head pleasure horse low. Then, after every dynamic turnaround, back up, or stop, the horse's head drops dramatically lower, his nose nearly hitting the dirt. The crowd goes wild. 3 years later, in 2018, Avila wrote again for Horse and Rider, this time on the same topic but with a focus on the acceptable side of the low headset spectrum. He shows 3 examples of naturally lower headsets that best support collection in Western horses. He notes that the easiest way to find a horse's natural comfort zone is to watch it move freely at liberty in a round pen without interference. Avila also points out that the horses used in this article were built slightly uphill, meaning that their withers sit marginally higher than their croup. This allows them to drive from behind and propel forward with balance, keeping their heads and necks where it's comfortable. Conversely, a horse built downhill struggles with true collection and hind-end impulsion. They have to pull themselves forward rather than push, lifting their head and neck with each stride. He goes on to acknowledge that while breeders have indeed selected for naturally lower headsets, there are extremes, the kind achieved not through genetics but through artificial means, the same kind he warned about 3 years earlier. And that's where the problem really starts. In today's show pen, especially in reining and Western pleasure, you'd be hard-pressed to find a horse that isn't built downhill. Decades of selective breeding for that naturally low and level look have created horses whose very conformation encourages a dropped frame. It's not just a training style anymore, it's literally built into the horse. But here's the problem. In chasing that low headset and flat neck, we've overdone it. Too many horses are built downhill, which makes collection harder. When the withers sit lower than the croup, true engagement, that lift and drive from the hind end, becomes physically difficult to maintain. So when riders ask for that ultra-low head and neck, thinking they're creating softness or self-carriage, what's really happening is the opposite. The horse ends up overloaded on the forehand, hollowing its back, disengaging its hind end, and shortening its stride. And honestly, a lot of people in the stock horse world still don't fully understand what collection is. It's often mistaken for headset. That misunderstanding gets passed down, trainer to student, student to student, until we have bred not just horses, but generations of riders who don't know what true collection feels like or even looks like. This isn't just about aesthetics anymore. This is simple biomechanics that we have understood for hundreds of years. Stock breeds already face challenges from downhill conformation and, in reining and cow events, a shorter neck. Pleasure horses these days are being bred for longer necks, mostly to exaggerate the silhouette, but no matter what type, all horses naturally carry about 60 to 65% of their body weight on their front end. So when you lower the head without engaging the hindquarters, you shift that balance further forward. That extra weight increases concussive force throughout the front legs, especially from the knee down.
I think it's being, you're a little closed-minded if you just want to cast stones and say, oh, they're peanut pushers and it's like the old pleasure horses, because that's not the case. These horses aren't 4-beat loping. Those horses don't win.
A correct lope on the left lead, for example, means that the horse first engages with its right hind. This foot hits the ground first. Next, the left rear and right front hit the ground simultaneously. The left front is the last hoof to hit the ground. In the 4-beat, the left rear and right hind do not hit the ground simultaneously. They strike the ground separately, making a 4th beat. In the case of most horses who 4-beat the lope, the condition is man-made. It often is the result of a rider who, in an effort to set a horse's head and make him lope slowly, allows the animal to shorten his stride, thereby losing impulsion in the rear, which creates a 4-beat lope. Too often, the rider becomes too concerned with making the horse slow down, as opposed to ensuring the horse moves correctly. In general, the more slowly a horse moves, the more likely he is to shorten his stride and begin forebeating, particularly if the rider lacks training or experience to avert the problem. Riding solely with your hands and not using enough leg to keep the horse driving from behind, allowing the horse to become lazy or sloppy at the lope, are the primary reasons for a horse to begin forebeating. When a horse is tired, physically or mentally, he will look for an easy way out. Loping properly in a 3-beat cadence is hard work for some horses. Without true engagement or collection, and those are not the same thing, the hind legs push instead of carry. They're just propelling the horse forward instead of helping bear the load. That means all that powerful muscle in the hindquarters is being underused, while the forehand takes the hit. A low head set or an overbent neck overstretches neck muscles that can create chronic strain. When the neck and thoracic spine lock up, the horse loses its natural ability to absorb shock and move freely. A hollow back puts stress on the supraspinous ligament and soft tissues of the back. The result is a flat, choppy gait with no impulsion or swing. The horse becomes heavy on the forehand, loses power from behind, and increases its risk of injury. Over time, the repetitive stress can lead to navicular changes, ring bone, arthritis, or soft tissue damage, not to mention the hock and stifle wear from inefficient movement. And because a hollow back means poor core strength, the spine itself becomes unstable, which just compounds on everything else. Everyone involved in this industry and breed knows this on some level. Almost every show horse is on some form of joint or hock maintenance, as well as receives therapies to combat muscle soreness that they consistently have. Some even end up going to rehab facilities to either increase their fitness so that they don't get sore, or to help fight whatever soreness and lameness they might have. This isn't a coincidence at this point. A downhill horse already carries more weight up front. Without collection, that imbalance just gets worse, and the horse ends up hanging between its front legs. The head and neck act like a lever, pulling that balance point even further forward. And the thoracic sling muscles, which are supposed to lift the chest, weaken over time. The horse starts to look even more downhill. Without proper engagement, the back stays hollow. The top line tenses, and the soreness sets in. The hind end, the horse's true engine, can't work efficiently, because the pelvis and spine are not aligned to allow that range of motion. In the end, this combination of a downhill build and forced low posture creates a horse that moves inefficiently, tires easily, and wears down faster than it should. Now that we understand how the horse's body systems connect, let's talk about collection. What it really means, how it works, and what it looks like. We'll be referring a lot to the horse's center of gravity. It's roughly about where the girth sits in most situations when a horse is at a neutral position. Collection is like a recipe with 3 main ingredients, and you begin reading it from the back. Our first ingredient is engagement, and that starts in the hind end. For a horse to be engaged, a joint called the lumbosacral joint, where the lower spine meets the pelvis, has to activate. When this happens, the pelvis tilts forward slightly under the horse. Then the hocks and stifles bend more deeply towards the center of gravity. In stock horse terms, this is referred to as a deep hock. This bend also works like a coiled spring, using the powerful muscles in the hindquarters, like the glutes, hamstrings, and quads, to create strength and lift. A properly engaged horse shows better balance and feels lighter on the front and more responsive. It feels rounder as the top line smooths and lifts. Gaits become springy, energetic, and reach further. The hind feet step under or even past the forefeet. The horse stays connected to the bit without leaning on the rider's hands. Engagement is not the same as propulsion. Propulsion is just the horse pushing forward, often leaving the hind legs trailing and the back flat. Engagement is stepping up under the body with purpose and power. The horse carries its weight efficiently, growing taller in front while lightening the forehand. Engagement is the foundation of true collection, performance, and long-term soundness. It also helps the horse respond better to subtle cues from the rider, and something the Western disciplines could use more of is a little bit more finesse. Your second ingredient is going to be lift through the back. This naturally follows proper hind end engagement. Without engagement, the back cannot lift efficiently. I'm going to show you a clip now that demonstrates that.
Through that horse's back, and then up through the neck, and that's where we get that roundness through the back and that roundness up through the neck, okay? But I want to make sure that roundness is coming from the right place. One of the things we hear a lot and we see a lot today in the modern horsemanship is a lot of people talk about using the spur to lift the back, right? Does it work? Yeah, it does. I'm going to go to the other side so you guys can see it over here. If I come up under this horse's belly, I can lift that horse's back, okay? And come up there. And we can see that lifting of the back. Yep, little lift of the back, okay? The back does lift. However, did the pelvis do anything at all? It did nothing, okay? And the lift is from here. If I do this and I lift this here, see where the lift is from? It's from the middle, right? I know, you're gonna be really sick of me here in the next few minutes. It's from the middle. We don't have the engagement of the pelvis, we have the lifting from here, we have a disconnect in the lower lumbar because we had no engagement of the lower lumbar, which is absolutely critical to true collection. So a lot of times what we see is when we see people lifting the back, what they're actually getting is really kind of a false collection. Now I want you to watch the back lift this time. Back lifted a little more, didn't it? The back lifted a little more and it lifted from here, okay? It lifted from this point forward because the pelvis came down, okay? And this is the big difference in that technique of lifting the back from the center versus engaging of the pelvis. We get that lifting from here, that wave carries up. As that wave carries up, it then lifts that rider up here, and then that carries through. As long as you have relaxation in the pole. What happens is if you have tension in the pole, right up here between their ears, I know, then you're going to have tension through that whole top line and it's going to block all of this. It's almost like that wave goes through and then it crashes into a breakwater and it just destroys everything. So if we have the engagement of the pole, we have the relaxation in the pole, the engagement of the hindquarters, then we can start getting that roundness and that true collection that we're looking for. But just lifting the back doesn't get it. Well, if we drop the head, okay, we drop the head down, I know, and we get that head to drop, the back lifts. Okay? This is another concept that we hear a lot of people say, especially in the Western horse world. You don't see it in the dressage world, but in the Western horse world, we drop the head, we lift the back. Well, again, if we're focused on lifting the back, we've already lost the plot. Okay? Yes, if you drop the head, the back can lift, but the goal is not lifting the back. The goal is getting the pelvis under. The back lifting is just a byproduct.
The forehand becomes lighter, giving the shoulders freedom to move and the front legs a longer, freer stride. From the rider's perspective, the horse feels uphill and balanced on its own. Shoulders can rotate freely, aiding tight turns and maneuvers. Hindquarter power flows efficiently, producing springy, energetic movement. In the hunt seat classes, this can make posting a lot easier, as instead of just posting, you can just let the horse toss you out of the saddle. And what are the benefits of this final piece? Correct weight distribution reduces strain on the front legs. It frees the horse to perform stops, rollbacks, or jumps efficiently. It preserves joints, muscles, and back health. It maintains proper posture compared to a dropped shoulder horse. In short, shoulder lift is the visible sign of true collection. Hindquarters engaged, back lifted, core active, and the forehand lightened. It shows a fully coordinated, biomechanically efficient horse. A horse with an extremely low headset, especially one built downhill, cannot be truly collected. Low posture shifts weight forward, strains the forehand, and prevents proper engagement and back lift. True collection comes from teaching the horse to use its body correctly, not just forcing the head down. So if the scientific community, you and I, all understand what true collection is, why do so many professionals in the American stock horse world still believe that a low headset or an overflexed neck is a sign of collection? We don't have to go too far for that answer. That belief is the result of a perfect storm. misinterpreted movement or text, selective breeding, and judging standards that gradually began to reward a look as opposed to function. In events like cutting and reining, horses naturally lower their heads to perform quick athletic maneuvers. That posture came from engagement and balance. It wasn't the goal, it was just a result. In the pleasure arena, a lowered head was once associated with a calm or relaxed horse, a desirable trait for the discipline. Over time, though, that visual became symbolic of good training. Trainers and judges began to equate the look of a low headset or an arched neck with the feeling of collection, regardless of how it was achieved. And that's where all of the trouble started. The result was a trend towards forcing horses into a peanut roller headset on the forehand, disengaged behind, unable to lift the back or carry the weight correctly. It's the exact opposite of collection. Now, breeders certainly played their part. As the preference for lower necks grew, breeding followed suit. But humans have a tendency towards more is better. What started as a mild natural trait became exaggerated until form overtook function, and the judges just rewarded it, over and over again. The low headset, the quieter frame, the better the score, until it became such a problem that some associations had to step in and rewrite the rulebooks to set limits on head carriage in the Western pleasure. So don't worry, reining, I'm sure your time is coming. Here's the thing. True collection is hard to see from the rail. It's a feeling, a balance between engagement, lift, and lightness. But a low and steady headset, that's visible. It's a clean, easy visual cue that anyone can spot, regardless of their experience level. Even if it's biomechanically hollow, it's much simpler to train a visual than to develop the real thing through correct progressive conditioning. And so, shortcuts appeared. Draw reins, restrictive bits, forced flexion, methods designed to fake collection by manipulating the front end rather than building the strength from behind. The look remained, but the function and the horse's long-term soundness did not. Ultimately, this belief comes down to one thing: a culture obsessed with what's seen rather than what is felt. What's fascinating is that in the Western pleasure, there's still a fixation on the deep hock, or at least the illusion of it. Trainers began asking for the horse's hip to travel slightly inward, making the hock appear deeper and the movement slower. It created the illusion of strength and softness, but none of it came from real engagement. No one seemed to stop and think that maybe what they were chasing wasn't a trick of posture, it was collection itself. Somewhere along the way, we stopped listening to the horse and started sculpting him instead. We traded balance for an image of it, mistaking the illusion of softness for the truth of collection. But collection isn't a headset. It isn't a frame. It's communication, a conversation between gravity, muscle, and trust. When you understand how the horse's body wants to move, you stop trying to control it and start learning to support it. Even the best horses, trained by the best hands, can't overcome physics. They can only give us what we ask for, even when what we're asking for hurts. But it doesn't have to stay that way. We can reward movement that helps instead of hinders. We can train for longevity, soundness, and partnership, not just pictures that look quiet. We can expect more from our judges. It's time we stop rewarding the picture and start rewarding the feel. They think they know, but they have no idea.
Because they just don't know.